be advised that this recorded webinar has been edited from its original format, which may have included a product demo. To set up a live demo or to request more information, please complete the form to the right. Or if you are currently not on CSC Global, there is a link to the website in the description of this video. Thank you.
Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar, CSC Domain Security Report 2022. What is the security maturity level of the Forbes Global 2000? My name is Christy DeMayo-Ziegler and I will be your moderator. Joining us today is Quinn Taggart. Quinn is a Senior Global Brand Security Advisor and assists clients in the areas of online brand and cybersecurity strategy. Quinn has been with CSC for almost 20 years, and his wealth of knowledge and experience is appreciated by brand owners as he has helped them to better understand their evolving digital asset portfolio and minimize their risk. Quinn regularly contributes to publishing articles, moderating webinars, and assisting in various research papers, assembling and compiling large data sources. And with that, let's welcome Quinn.
Thanks, Chrissy. So here's the things that we want to try to cover today. We're going to talk a little bit about zero trust security models and what they really mean and how that relates to the risks to your brands. We're going to talk about the adoption of the key security measures for the Forbes Global 2000 that we analyzed, why your registrar actually matters, and overall domain security posture of the Global 2000 companies. That's an important part to see where you fit into that. And homoglyphs, why should you care? We're going to touch a little bit on how those variations can really impact your brand online, and then some basic recommendations. So when we talk zero trust security models and how that relates as threats to the brands, what we have to remember is what zero trust security model really means. And that just basically means never trust, always verify. And making sure that devices should not be trusted by default, even if they are connected to a permissioned network, such as a corporate LAN, or even if they were previously verified. So you want to make sure that if you've got single sign-on or anything along that line, that there's other ways for you to validate and make sure that the users are authorized within the area that you're working with. Now, this is a term that was coined a long time ago. It was actually in 1994 when the term zero trust was coined. So, you know, this sort of model has been around for a bit, but you can see where compromised or hijacked legitimate domain names, as well as malicious registrations, homoglyphs we're going to talk about in a little bit, can relate to a wide variety of attack vectors, including things like subdomain hijacking, ransomware, phishing attacks. Now, we hear a lot about some of these particular attack vectors because generally when they happen, it's very impactful, very widespread, and does a lot of damage. And that's why you don't hear about some of the other ones, but they're just as dangerous. So when we look at the adoption of the key security measures by the Forbes Global 2000, we took 2,000 domains, one for each of the companies, and analyzed their security posture. Now, what we're looking for are some of the key security features that are available on most domains: DMARC, DNS redundancy, registry lock, CAA records, and DNSSEC. Now, there are some TLDs that don't support some of those particular features, and we took that into account when we were looking through. But one of the biggest jumps year over year has been in DMARC. And I think a lot of that comes from the phishing attacks uptick that we saw in 2020. And that was as a result, we assumed through COVID, but realizing that email security is a key factor. DMARC is definitely on the uptick, but some of the other ones are even on a downward spiral, not grossly, maybe a point or half a point here or there, but you can see that the adoption rate on some of the other measures isn't as great as it is for DMARC. So why does your registrar really matter? And I mean, when you start looking at registrars and their security choices, it really does make a difference. Now, we divide up registrars into a couple of different buckets. One are consumer grade registrars. Those are your basic retail kind of oriented registrars. They're geared specifically for domain services, websites, email, for personal use, small business entrepreneurs that are just getting started. Automation is the key for them, which means a lot of the complex country code registrations, like the Middle East and some of the other countries, they require paperwork. Well, the consumer-grade registrars aren't really geared for that kind of manual process. They're all about the automation. Whatever they can automate, whatever they can connect direct with the registries with, is what they're going to want to sell and sell a lot of. Now, when you start to look towards registry lock, there's two key components in registry lock to consider. One is, does the TLD or the extension that you're using for your core domain name actually support that? Because not all of them do. But also, too, is that registry lock is a manual process. And that's the reason that they're reverting automation into a manual process is because of the security. By putting the human element in there, it actually enhances the security and keeps your domains safe. A consumer-grade registrar is not really geared for this. As I mentioned before, it's a manual process. And their pricing model, of course, is reflective of the automation that's available to them. More automation, cheaper the price. But it also comes as a cost in things like strategic guidance, having dedicated account management and support teams as well. Most client contacts that we're dealing with are managing the domain inventory, are not doing so full time. Perhaps based on some surveys that we've done over the years, 5 to 7% of their days are in that range of managing domain names. So there's some reliance on the registrar for the expertise and consultative approach necessary to keep things maintained. This is why using an enterprise-level registrar will give you the advantage that you're looking for, not only from a service and a day-to-day management perspective, but also for strategic guidance and allowing you to be able to go and take advantage and be aware of all of these other security measures that are there. So when we look at the overall domain security posture for the Forbes Global 2000, this is where it sort of pans out. And what we're looking at is we score the individual domain names that we analyzed from 0 to 100%. 100% security score means that they're taking advantage of all the major security elements that are available to them. DMARC, registry lock, DNSSEC, SPF, TXT records, and so on. All of those elements are present. There's only a few that are in that high range. You can see there's only 50 out of 2,000 companies that are in that 75 percentile to 100 percentile range, where the bulk of them are below 50%. Now, if that sounds a little Chicken Little, oh my God, the sky is falling kind of affair, this is fixable. This is fixable. All that the clients really need, or the companies really need to do, is to take stock of where things are and what's available to them. Not all of these measures cost money. Some do. Registry lock typically has a cost associated with it. DNSSEC might have a cost associated with it as well. But at the end of the day, there are some of these security features that come at low or no cost available. All that needs to be done is attention needs to be paid. And if you balance the costs against an outage, the ROI is staggeringly in favor of the cost. If you consider any large e-tailer that was down for even an hour, the cost could easily run into the millions of dollars. I think we can think of a few e-commerce sites that definitely would fit that category. And not to mention the knock-on effect of reputational damage and loss of trust. So when you're considering what it takes to go and secure your posture online, it really does balance out. So where do the industry sectors kind of fall into all of this? Well, our top 5 performing industries, IT and software, business services and supplies, hotel, restaurants and leisure, media, and then we have aerospace and defense. Now, there's a couple in there that I definitely would expect to be top of the pile. Bottom 5, consumer durables, food markets, construction, trading, and materials. Again, I'm not overly surprised at that. What I am surprised at are a couple of the sectors that we know are targets. One, banking. Well, banking's right in the middle. There are 27 industry categories within the Forbes Global 2000 list. Banking ranks right in the middle at 14. Now, certainly would have expected them to be top of the pile. However, they're not. Oil and gas is another one. We've seen some attacks on the grid in the last little bit, and they're ranked at 18. They're actually 4 points off of banking and further closer to the bottom of the pile. The sad reality is that there's 137 companies that have a domain security score of absolute 0, meaning they're not taking advantage of any of the basic security features that are available to them. And unfortunately, primarily, most of those, 82% of those, are in the APAC region. And as we know, a lot of activity is happening in the APAC region, but they don't seem to be taking stock of the security features that are available to them. So on this particular analysis, I'm the data guy, right? And the data without context is just data. So in adding some context to the analysis that we've prepared for you, the idea is to look at the connecting the dots, right? If you're going to have an enterprise level registrar, and we tout that you should, then what does that really mean, and what kind of an advantage does that give you? And certainly we see, as we look at the Forbes Global 2000, a lot of the companies that are in the higher rankings of that list are utilizing enterprise level registrars. And what does that really mean? Well, we can see on this slide here how that translates into their security scores. So those are in the rank of 1 to 500, typically using an enterprise level registrar, have a much higher score overall than the ones that are on the tail of the 2,000 companies. Does that really mean that somebody that has a rank of 1,800, 1,900, or whatever shouldn't use an enterprise level registrar? No, everybody should be using an enterprise level registrar, and the reason being is that, as I mentioned before, twofold. One is that you'll be able to take advantage of all of these additional security elements that are important, but also, two, you're going to get the consultative approach necessary to make sure that you're not only aware of new things that are coming up, but that you can also take advantage of them. So let's look at the homoglyph aspect. And so there's a couple of different ways to look at these kinds of variations. There's what we call the fuzzy matches. And this is where we look at the lookalikes. There's substitutions. A 1 for an L, or an I for an L, a 0 for an O. Those kinds of common substitutions we're seeing. They're Latin-based characters. Everything's Latin-based characters all the way along. Typically, these substitutions are done in .coms. Homoglyphs in and of itself as what we call IDNs, or internationalized domain names. This is where you're going to take an accented character and substitute it in for a non-accented character. So as you can see in the example, we've got accented C's, but it could be easily an accented O or an accented E or anything along that line are going to come up. These actually craft what we call an IDN, or an internationalized domain name. They are valid. There's a whole slew of them that are available to you, but visually they could be confusing enough to pass on a phishing attack. Then we have what we call cousin domains. So these will be domains that are exact matches to the brands, and in countries or extensions that are not necessarily relevant to the operation of the particular company, and they can take advantage of that by trying to build some sort of credibility on a phishing attack. Keyword matches. So adding in extra keywords that are either related to or part of the attack vector that you're working with, that go along with that particular company's brand, add .com or .net or something along that line to it, and then create something new. And then we've got the homophones, the sound-alikes. So as you can see in here, CSC kind of spelled out a little weird, but that's where you get things like SUX, S-U-X, as opposed to S-U-C-K-X. those are the kinds of scenarios that we'll see as well. Again, trying to play on the brands a little bit more to try to add some credibility to the attack vector. So what did we find when we were going through? Well, we were looking at homoglyph domains owned by third parties, and 82% of those have masked WHOIS ownership details. They're either taking advantage of privacy protection available at the registrar level or taking advantage of the GDPR privacy protection that's available. And that's up 5 percentage points on 2021. So we're seeing a bit of an uptick on the privacy protection for the third parties. And that could imply that people are trying to hide, they're trying to hide the activity. Also, too, a full half of those have active mail records. And that's up 5 points from last year as well. What this means to us is that, hey, look, if it's got an active mail record, it's ready to go right now to be able to send out spam or phishing attack emails and ready to go. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't activate one that doesn't have one in a fairly short order, but these ones are already configured and ready to go, and that's certainly part of the analysis as we look for what's going to be an immediate threat from those domains. Also, too, when we look at the registrars that are supporting this kind of activity, we have our usual suspects from before. These are exactly the same 3 that were top of the pile from last year. So now what? Well, these are the basic recommendations that we have for you. And, of course, if you need more information, we're going to have a Contact Us piece here for you to click on. But our basic recommendations are as follows. Adopt a defense-in-depth approach for domain management and security. Now, that includes making sure that you've got a pretty good grip on what's in your inventory. Now, part of that challenge, of course, is that there's always going to be situations where maybe Joey in marketing has gone out and picked up a couple of domain names, put it on his credit card because he had an immediate need and didn't follow process. Those are the kinds of things that you want to try to keep a really good firm grip on. And it includes step 2, which is monitoring the domain space and your key digital channels, making sure that you're aware of any new registrations that contain your brand and evaluate those on a regular basis to make sure you know what you need to do. Some you're going to take action on, some you're not. Some are going to be in-house, some might be vendors or distributors or friendly parties, but being able to keep an eye on that particular aspect is going to really, really help maintain the credibility for your brand online. Now, that also cascades into option 3, which is using global enforcement. You're going to need to be able to do takedowns. You're going to be able to, or want to be able to, take advantage of internet blocking. So we've heard a lot about blocking programs in the last little while, the donuts blocking program within the new GTLDs, the adult blocks, the short blocks. There's going to be more of those types of blocking mechanisms in play in the next little while. I think people have kind of caught on to the fact that they are cost effective and do have value. It's a matter of evaluating your brand against possibly competing trademark holders to make sure that you're protecting yourself. And number 4, of course, is to confirm your vendor business practices aren't contributing to fraud and brand abuse. We've had situations, and I've seen a few breach notices come out, where people have come in through a vendor portal or have used vendor access in order to be able to compromise a particular company's situation. Now, companies like Security Scorecard will rate cybersecurity postures of corporate entities through completing scored analysis of the cyber threat intelligence signals. So that's a bit of a mouthful in itself. So maybe research your key vendors and make sure they are not your weakest link.